But we have got to get to the constant turmoil, the negotiation, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to the college football playoff. It's going to 12. The next 2 years, it's going to be at 12 teams. There are already models out there about 14. And this just kind of came to me, just thought about this. If the SEC and the Big Ten are so good, and they have a bunch of great brands, and this is not trying to take a shot at them, but if they are that good, with that many good teams, why do they need automatic qualifiers? Somebody explain that to me. Why does any conference need automatic qualifiers? Why would they need more? They're that good, they'll be able to earn their way into the playoffs.
So here's, one of the details that I saw this morning when they were listing, the qualifications and who gets into the 14-team playoff. And it had a little asterisk next to Notre Dame, and it said Notre Dame if they're in the top 14. Well, duh. Shouldn't the 14-team playoff be the top 14?
Yeah.
And doing automatic qualifiers, to me, is to guard against something that may never happen. Like what they're guarding against, or they're assuring, is that the SEC and Big Ten have the most teams in, so that they don't have a year where they only have 2. And that's like.
So they're playing prevent defense.
So yeah, exactly. They're playing prevent defense on a situation that would never happen. And I mean, remember some of this debate when it came into the 12-team playoff, where they were like, well, what if this happens and this happens? I'm like, well, if you've got, even before realignment, if you have 5 power conferences and the top 2 of every conference gets in, and then one group of 5 and then one rando, then you're kind of guarding against something that you're like would never even happen. Like, what if the Pac-12 wind up out of it? Well, the only way they could wind up out of it was to self-destruct, which they did, but they have to be really bad not to be in it. So you're guarding against situations that aren't going to happen, or like so far out there and theoretical. And you're also trying to hoard most of the money for yourself. And you're using the cachet and the power that you have in the SEC and Big Ten to say, like, listen, we want all you here, but if you don't give us what we want, we can find a way to push you out.
Craig, I saw a note, and I think it was Brett McMurphy that said it was an invitational now, that it wasn't a college football playoff, but the way they're setting this up, if it all comes to fruition, is that it's actually an invitational, not an actual something you earn.
Yeah, I think that was just his comment on one of the types of formats that was out there today. What was it, the 16 team that they're already starting to talk about, which is what I tweeted last night. I don't get into really talking or tweeting about everything that comes out, but that one last night, seeing the conversation already started, my whole thought was, why not just start talking about 16? Like, why don't we just fast forward? Are we really thinking the 12's just now official? You're already talking about 14 literally the next day. Yeah. You've got people at least that are involved, are putting into the media and letting the media know that you're already talking about 14. So why don't we just cut the BS and let's just slice through 14, unless you think that's the ultimate final format that this thing will be, and then that's fine. Like, let's get it established, and that's going to be the final format. But if not, let's just cut the bowl and let's just go to 16 where it eventually goes. Because for me, jockey and get all the details that you want, but can we just at some point, hopefully here in the next few years, just as a college football fan, as much as I love the chaos at sometimes too, I just would like to kind of have a format that's just the college football playoff, and that's what it is, and it's not every couple years it changes, and then it's 14 and it's 12 and it's 16, and it's like just establish something. I think would be kind of nice, and have it settle in and be able to sit. The 4 did. We let the 4 sit for a few years, and eventually came to the point where just too much money was left on the table, and there was the Florida State situation, for example, or prior to that, a Baylor-TCU situation. And so everybody finally got to a point where enough came together where you're like, all right, we need to go past 4. But, man, you haven't even left 4 in the dust all the way, and we're already on, like, format number 3 that you're talking about already. So can we
without even trying format number 2.
Right. It's just kind of silly, and I'm not, upset about it by any means. I just think it's kind of ridiculous that these leaders don't see how crazy that is, that they can't even just sit on something for more than 5 seconds. But,
And, look,
by the way, hold on. You mentioned the media. These were columns last night. Murphy, Mandel, Dinich, Thamel, Vanini, Ross Dellinger. This was a talking point.
Yeah,
it's almost like when you're on the Republican or Democratic campaign, and these are talking points for when you go in front of camera.
Remember Al Gore's lockbox?
Yeah.
Lockbox. Like, that was the thing. Now, It is weird to me that you do that. Like, what if, and that's what they don't understand, what if 12 is amazing? What if the way that they figured it out is amazing? If it works out so well and we all enjoy it and it's really good, what if that's amazing? And then you've already said, like, now we're going to add 2 more teams to it. And you're like, well,
yeah.
like we don't even know, like, we've all wanted it as college. I say most of us have wanted it as college football fans for a long time, is a real playoff that, like, pits teams against each other for multiple rounds that would see who's the hottest and the best and who can go through a long season like that, because every other sport's like that. But we don't necessarily know how much we want it. So, also, like, let us have this meal before we decide.
How do you know if something tastes good if you don't bite into it?
Yeah, and, like, I know this has happened to me a lot in my life, but, like, you order something at a restaurant and it's just too much, and you wish you had just ordered the small. Like, that's what you don't want to happen here. You don't want it to be too much, and, but I agree with Craig. Like, look, if you're just throwing 14 out there and saying there's momentum so that then you come out with a better plan that's 16, then just tell us the 16-team plan.
Here are a couple of headlines.
Let's say this was going to be.
Here are a couple of the headlines, and Craig, I read some of them, but you guys react to it. Inevitability of Big Ten SEC access, revenue, power, college football playoff. We know that. Dennis Dodd will join us here in about 20 minutes. Is cluster blank one word or hyphenated?
It's one word in my dictionary.
Why the great SEC needs guaranteed spots. 14-team college football playoff has momentum. 14-team model could include 3 automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten and the SEC. That's not breaking news, but it's just amazing to me that it's so complicated, and yet this seems to be so simple. You know who doesn't struggle with this when they have their playoff every year? The FCS. They have their teams, they're invited, they play the games, they play a tournament. I think there are 16 teams, and they have a national championship game.
Yeah, but that's not apples to apples. That's a league or a group of leagues that actually see each other eye to eye. There's not
That's true.
leagues actively trying to sabotage the others and grow to be NFL imposters and make all of the money. And they have the inherent advantages already, the SEC and the Big Ten, but there's not a level of that in the FCS. So there's nobody trying to bogart all of the playoffs. If there was an SEC and Big Ten in the FCS, then yeah, the rules would have to change. It wouldn't be about winning as much anymore as it would be the impression that you give in the way that you lost to Alabama and how that was a great loss in the long run. And so that's the problem I have with the potential of the playoff that we're talking about now, is there are so many that are bought into the idea that the Big 12 champ can't compete with, like, the 4th place team in either league, which is bull. And I'll just be respectful to the business that we're in and not continue. If we're in studio, I just say it. But I think that's, kind of the way people are programmed now. Whereas FCS, it's like, yeah, everybody gets a fair crack. You get your advantages for having one more and things like that. But yeah, nobody's going to go for that because they don't respect each other enough. The Big Ten and SEC don't feel like, and I'm not trying to paint them to be bad guys, this is just why this won't ever happen. They don't view the Big 12 as equals. They don't view the ACC as equals. They don't, if anything, they view them as prey, and they're just going to try to pick off their best programs and then make more of the money and have more of the volume of college football attention. And so that's why. I mean, it's that simple. There's not that same level of respect or equality. And when you look at, money and prestige and those things, yeah, there is a separation. But I think it's just that it's like the old boys club, or the old boys club. Yeah, it's just kind of like that, I think, at that level of college football.
The Masters, which is played the second week or so in April at Augusta National, is not like an at-large. It's an invitational tournament. You earn your way into the tournament by winning certain tournaments, including the Masters, and you're brought back until you decide you can't play there anymore, or other tournaments that you win, or where you are in the world golf rankings, or inside the top 10. Not everybody's invited. It doesn't have a field of 100 and whatever it is normally golfers that you see most every weekend. There's less than 100, and they want it that way. They want their own invitation, and they can run it because basically it's their tournament.
Yeah, and I want to stop and pause for a second, because I'm saying the SEC and the Big Ten I don't want to paint them to be the bad guys, even though I think that Greg Sankey probably does as masterful a job as anybody of kind of playing the bad guy behind closed doors, but being the good guy in front. That the guy that's got who do we have on yesterday? Convinced that he's going to save college football.
Tim Brando.
Tim Brando, yeah.
And so there's that, and I don't completely agree with Tim on that. I hope that he's right in the long run for the sake of everybody. But let's put the onus where it belongs, on the TV networks. Mm-hmm. That's who doesn't want the Big 12 to have 3 teams, or the ACC to have 3 teams in a post-Florida State, Clemson type of a world. They don't want those matchups because they don't bring the ratings. We're not talking about who's the best team in all this. We're talking about who puts the best TV matchups on your screens that brings in the most eyeballs for ABC or Disney or the same thing, but NBC, etc.
ESPN,
Who gets the
CBS,
most streaming
Fox.
audiences, and that's what it's about. It's not about winning. I mean, it is to an extent that it has to be, but when you can cut that off and say, now it's about who's got the biggest brand from the biggest league and the biggest audience, that's how we want to fit them into the playoff.
When Florida State, when they had Charlie Ward beat Nebraska, who was a heavy underdog, to win the Orange Bowl in a great game where Nebraska missed a field goal at the end of the game. What network was that game on?
I believe it was on CBS.
Okay. I wouldn't know. It may have been NBC.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You never really knew that. Like, you knew where the Orange Bowl was, the
Or
Rose Bowl.
ABC. Like, it
It
was on one of the big 3. I'll promise you that.
You cannot, and I know this is impossible, you cannot have those who are broadcasting control who wins the national championship.
Too late.
Too late.
They're already creating the leagues.
Well, and
What's a hay's out the barn. The dam is broke.
And so if you're wondering, like what caused all this, there used to be things like sports would always get big numbers, but there were other things that would get big numbers. So the networks weren't always trying to control everything they could control, because you knew that the NFL Sunday night game was going to get a big number, and Monday Night Football would get a nice number, but also Seinfeld and Cheers and Friends and all these other things got huge numbers. Now there's so much content out there. The only thing that the networks can bank on of people sitting down and watching live and watching through commercials on is live sports and those events. So how do you make that better? Well, you cut out the riffraff, right? You don't have, and in their minds, they're just trying to create the biggest TV show they can create.
Yeah, for a primetime spot.
Yeah.
And for the primetime spots. But I know that they also love the fact that there is that live content, and that's why they still need, for all the talk about, well, it's everybody else will just go away. No, they're still going to be around. You mean to tell me that they're not going to want these networks to broadcast some other football games and have that fill some spots and some and
Hell, the
some TV
networks need to.
They have to have the Big 12 and the ACC and some of these other leagues. What else is going to be on? I mean, during the fall. And so the whole idea of they're not going to be involved, now it's a matter of how much can the TV networks trim them down money-wise to where they have no choice but to accept much lower deals than the ever-growing deals they're giving to the other two. They created the separation. They put the price tags out there. Now, granted, the leagues negotiated for themselves, and there's really only 2 that have the power to fully negotiate and be on the guaranteed winning side and to really get whatever they want. And they've cut those deals here recently, but it is slim pickings. It's slim pickings to the extent the Pac-12 is dead.
Yeah.
I mean, for all intents and purposes. The Pac-2 is what remains, but that's a shell of itself no matter what happens with those two. So they're not afraid to kill off a league, but they're dang sure going to make sure that those other schools that can fill those late night spots ended up in the Big 12. And guess what? They're still going to air those games. They're still going to air Cal and in the ACC, so it's not like there's just games being eliminated. They still need games from non-Big Ten and SEC schools. It's just that the premium that they pay and the premium they put on those games are much different. And how much can you fight that if you're the Big 12 or whatever the ACC is, whatever post-world they live in? Let's just say there's no Florida State or whatever. What kind of offers do they get? And how much can you fight and say, no, we want more? What's the ultimatum that you arrive at? And so that's the part I think we're going to come to here pretty soon.
They already have the bigger TV contracts. They've earned that based on who they are, the logos, the audience, the traditions. Now they're going to get more of the college football playoff money, which will increase more than the people who are already behind them. And then on top of that, get more teams, which means more, I guess you could say, units. In the college football playoff. Brett McMurphy I had to read, wait a minute, is it in 2026, if they go to one of the proposed 14-team playoffs, 11 of the 14 teams would be in because of automatic bids.
Yeah.
11 of the 14 would be in because of automatic bids or connections to conferences. The Big 12 and the ACC each would get 2, and of course the others would get 3, and then the G5 would get 1, and then there are 3 remaining after that.
Notre Dame would take 1 if they're involved in the top 15, which you would like to think Marcus Freeman will have them a top 15 regular team. So there's another spot that you would take away most likely in majority of years, you would think. So, yeah, it's a bit of a cluster, and I think that
one word or is that hyphenated?
It's the word I'm using politely while we're at this establishment here. But
I think it's one word.
Yeah, no, I think it's one word. I said that a second ago. I think it's one word. But
I agree.
I don't know what about for other people. But, yeah, I mean, the game's kind of rigged, and that's the part that I wonder if anybody – I guess not. I wonder if like a Big Ten or SEC fans ever like, you know what, this is not really what any other sport is or what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be about the level, but I think they get too caught up in the pride thing, and so it's like, let's, instead of saying like this isn't really the best way to decide a champion, let's just celebrate all of this money that's not really even mine as a fan, but that will contribute to my program and separate us further to where it eventually you'll have no choice but to have a completely separate thing, because you're going to be making per team like $100 million more than the teams you're competing against.
Right now it's 25 to 40 million. Now, then it's going to be 60 million.
Yeah,
you're right.
This is going to be 100 million in 10 years, and so that's not the same thing. So if the goal is to save college football, you're not really going about it the right way. You're going about it in a way that's just creating further separation. But if the goal is to separate, then can we just say
go
that
ahead
and
go
ahead and get there? But you can't, because the reason why is you don't have anything established to do that. Mm-hmm. You don't have a TV contract for that. You don't have the production lined up and all those types of things. You'd have to do that
all when you don't even know what you're going to buy?
Right, but I mean, I'm saying you're all on your own, and that's where I think of like, why don't they just do it right now? Well, that's easier said than done. You don't just break off and then you have everything set up the way that it's already set up right now. So that's the part that's going to take some time if that's the goal.
Stuart Mandel said, why does no one in a position to do so ask Sankey or the power money-hungry commissioners these questions? Why do you need so many guaranteed spots? And we know the answer.
Yeah.
We know the answer.
Creed.
But, well, yeah, because we can. By the way, I think it's because you can.
No, it's that too.
The first question I would ask Tony Petitti or Greg Sankey is that question. And I would especially ask Greg Sankey that you were on the hill of we didn't want any automatic qualifiers because his ultimate game was to maybe get half the field.
Yeah, we'll get 7 or 8 of the 14.
Yeah, if they got if they got 6 of the field, that he could finally bust out and say, my master plan is complete. I told you we're better. And by getting the automatic qualifiers, now they still may get that, but now you have to ensure that other people get them. That's why he didn't want to. He wanted to be able to stare down the ACC and the Big 12 in particular and say, see, you're not us.
Yeah,
you can't get here.
But he cares about the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's where I don't believe exactly what Tim was saying, with all due respect, yeah.
All right.
And I do think Greg Sankey knows he needs everybody right now. It's just, when do we get to that point, Craig, that you brought up, where they just see that they're carrying 20 extra pounds and they can burn it pretty quick.
It's going to be the equivalent of Texas Tech playing SFA or something, but it's all equal, but in a playoff format, when they make $50 million more than SFA does to spend on their roster and NIL, and then you're trying to act like it's all the same thing. And it's like, look, if you're going to have advantages built in, that was always the case. The Blue Bloods always had more at their disposal because of tradition, history, school size, all those things. But it's something that you'd like to see it be as equal as possible. But the powers that be are the ones that are not allowing that, because they don't care about it being that way. They care about how sexy of a TV product they can put out there, and that's really what it boils down to.
Well, and Bill Hancock, we have to get this done within 30 days, and now it's been 7 days. We're at Pivovar.